Welcome to Firsts in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I'm your host, Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, The Hand of Adonai series, and Firsts in Fiction.
And I'm Alton Gansky, the author of about 45 books, most of them novels, and a good bit of nonfiction stuff as well.
And I'm Molly Jo Riley, producer of the podcast, writer of the Unemployment Cookbook and the upcoming mystery location, NOLA.
And we want to thank you all for joining us. Those of you listening on the audio broadcast, you can watch us live at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on each Tuesday. For those of you with a calendar, you are probably wondering why Heather Luby is not on with us. You know, this is the third Tuesday of the month. That snuck up really fast. But she is unable to join us tonight. She has family commitments, and family always comes first, so we encourage that, and we miss her. But we are looking forward to having her join us in a couple of weeks. She should be able to join us in maybe for 2 weeks in a row, maybe for one here, and then a couple later. But she might be able to make a couple of our March broadcasts. So we're looking forward to that. So we miss her tonight, but she's off having fun with her family, so we are excited about that. And here we are, excited to be with you tonight. And our Ask the Author question tonight comes from Maggie McLean, who I did not notify was going to that we were going to answer her question again. I've had a busy day. I apologize. I'm terrible at this. I should probably put Molly in charge of notifying people, but then I would have to make show notes earlier. Anyhow, Maggie McLean, wife of Stephen McLean, former podcast host of our show here, asks, what books have you read have influenced you most as a writer? And I found this one to be difficult to answer because I tend to think of authors that influence me and not necessarily particular works. So I kind of found myself answering this in a very circular fashion and thinking of the authors that most inspired me and most influenced me, and then coming back to some of the works that they had written. And so that's kind of how I approached it. For me, some of the names that pop into mind immediately are Flannery O'Connor. You've heard me mention her time and time again. F. Scott Fitzgerald, Raymond Carver, and somebody I often forget to mention, but shouldn't, Tim O'Brien. And in answering this question, thank you for asking, Maggie, I realize again how much of an influence his prose has had on my writing, specifically his collection of short works called The Things They Carried. Some read it as a kind of a disconnected novel. Others read it as just a collection of short stories. Either way, it won the National Book Award. It's an incredible piece of literature and has deeply impacted me, not only as a human being, but also as a writer of prose and of fiction. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention Brett Anthony Johnston, my former mentor and professor. I think it's been a couple of weeks since I mentioned his name, so I've got to meet my quota and mention him again. His novel, the first one, or rather collection of short works that I read, was Corpus Christi by Brett Anthony Johnston. His new novel is out. I say new, it's been out for, I think, a couple of years now. Remember Me Like This. Super fantastic book. You guys got to pick that up if you get a chance. Cormac McCarthy is a big one. And so just to give you a quick list of works that I feel have really impacted me, A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor, Corpus Christi by Brett Anthony Johnston, The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Things They Carried, Tim O'Brien. And if I had to pick a book by Cormac McCarthy, I would probably choose The Road. I know there are other works that have been better received from him, like All the Pretty Horses and No Country for Old Men, which I loved, by the way. But I think there was something about The Road that really captured my attention and really impacted me as a writer. So I think when I write, those are the voices that I hear in my mind. Those are the masters that I aim to emulate and that I've kind of fashioned my voice after. So, Maggie, that's my answer for you. Pops, how about you?
Well, this is one of those questions, Maggie, that if you ask it on a different day than today, I'd probably give you a different answer. So it's always difficult for me to nail these things down. But the first ones that came to mind for me is a book that I've mentioned several times over the last year or so, and that's Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama. I really got serious about writing and reading. I read a lot as a kid, but as an adult, I got very interested in short story science fiction, and then novels and science fiction. Even now as I'm talking, I'm thinking of some others. But Rendezvous with Rama really moved me in a number of ways. First of all, the concept was so, if you'll pardon the pun, out of this world, that I was just glued to the book from beginning to end. In fact, that's happened each time I've read it. And then there were other books that followed it. I remember listening to one on, this is going to date me here, listening to one on, I think it was audio cassette, not even CD.
What's an audio cassette?
You'll read about them in the history books. And excuse me. And listening to it as I was headed up to a conference from Southern California to Oakland. But anyway, the way he described things, Arthur C. Clarke, to me, would break the rules, but he was so good, the rules didn't apply to him. So, he was a super writer, man, and could get away with that, like Ray Bradbury, for example. He could get away with stuff like that. But unless you're Ray Bradbury or not Spider Robinson, but Arthur C. Clarke, it's best to pay a little attention to the rules before you throw them all out the door. But anyway, the way he portrayed alien life, but the way he kept it all very human and stuff, and it really made me realize the kind of imagery you could paint on a reader's mind, and I thought that was a very powerful thing. And then since, again, I became more interested in writing while reading science fiction, though I would go on to write other things, but Spider Robinson did a series of books called Callahan's Bar. They have different names to them. Spider Robinson is, how do I describe him? He's an old hippie. And I don't know if we could be buds or not. And, I'm not much of a drinker, so I don't go to bars and stuff, but Callahan's Bar was so funny and so out of the box. In a nutshell, think Cheers, but think of Cheers as being a place that only if you have a need you can find it. And then people from around the universe show up. So you can have aliens and time travelers, and he has a talking German Shepherd, and they live on puns, and it's, I think, the only book I've ever read that I laughed so hard I fell off the couch. And it just showed me the power of humor in writing. So I got to where I was very, very much in love with the things he was writing, especially Callahan's Bar, but he did a few other things. Epitome Mine was a great series of short stories compiled into a book. So Maggie, I would say today it would be Rendezvous with Rama, Arthur C. Clarke, and any of the Callahan Bar books by Spider Robinson.
Pops, a couple things real quick. I didn't mention Kurt Vonnegut Jr., even though I love his work. I don't know that my writing takes after him at all, but I remember you reading me portions of Rendezvous Rama in the house in Ojai. And so I remember I think you were so excited about the first chapter, I think you read it to us. I've got a memory of that. I might be misremembering. That's happened once, maybe twice in my life, so the possibility exists, but I do remember that. So kind of an interesting memory. And to answer your question, Molly Jo, an audio cassette tape, have you seen Guardians of the Galaxy?
No.
Yeah.
I'm just going to log off now. I'll talk to you guys next week when I recover.
That's just a sad thing.
It's on Netflix. I'll watch it tonight, okay?
Lay hands on Molly and anoint him with oil.
That's right.
Dear God, help my people understand me.
Yeah.
This is, by the way, this is tonight's Catus Interruptus. I don't know what the problem is lately, but the last 3 weeks on the podcast, my cats keep climbing up on me and getting into the mic, so I apologize for that in advance.
Felinus interruptus.
Yeah.
I just locked mine out, so.
I could, but then it'd be a whole lot noisier than it is to let them just climb up me once in a while.
Well played, well played. So Molly, what books have most influenced you as a writer?
Crime dramas. That was.
And moving on.
So anyway, yeah, I know how to kill people. What I mean is, actually, I keep going back to it, but realistically, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott is pretty much a defining book for me. I loved the style. I grew up reading that over and over, and the character was so relatable for me. Being her name is Jo. She was a tomboy, very much like me, a little bit, not quite poverty-stricken, but not really rich, and kind of feeling awkward in life and always wanting to be a writer. I grew up thinking that was me in book form. So I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, as I got older, I really do like crime dramas. I don't have any particular one that I like. I like different crime stories, crime series. Sherlock Holmes. My uncle got me the complete Sherlock Holmes collection when I was in college, and that made a really, really big dent in my imagination. I studied mystery writing in college, and there's an anthology I have of short stories. I really enjoyed that. And then another anthology book that I picked up in college that's just great, great literature. And in that it has A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. And it has The Yellow Wallpaper by, what's her name? Charlotte Perkins. Yes. And that book has Nathaniel Hawthorne, I mean, a whole bunch of really great short stories, poetry, everything in it. And I love that book. But as for like one particular novel that has shaped me, I really couldn't say. I think I will take all of your answers, both you and Al, and just kind of combine them and say, yes, good quality writing books and authors that I aspire to be like.
Absolutely. Good answers all. So, and those will be on the show notes in some form or the other in case you're interested in some of those names that we mentioned. We want to move today, or tonight rather, to our main topic, which is making your schedule work with your writing. And you may have thought that might be a bit of a misprint. Isn't it making your writing work in your schedule? But I think we've got it correct here, and it's one of the things that you will discover early on as a writer, or at least you should discover early on in a writer, is that you don't have time to write. You never will. Instead, you have to make the time to write. And so we'll probably come back to that in some various ways. But Pops, you've got a bit of an illustration here that you wanted to lead off with that I think really kind of illustrates that point.
Yeah, a little story about my father-in-law, who was a minister for many, many years. And if you've been involved in church life, you know, churches can be kind of weird, and they tend to attract some odd people. And anyway, he had preached a sermon about redeeming the time, which is a Bible phrase. The Apostle Paul writes about redeeming the time, for the days are evil. But in that sermon, he mentions that we all have the time to do what it is that we want to do. Well, there's always someone in the congregation who wants to take you to task for such things, and on the way out, this little old lady said, I don't have time for those things that you were talking about. And my father-in-law, Don, said, we all get the same number of hours each day. You have time to do what you want to do. And then she slapped him. I don't know if she ever came back or not. And I'm guessing perhaps she didn't have both oars in the water or something. But some people don't want to accept responsibility for time, and writers have to accept responsibility for time. Like it or not, if you don't like the process, whatever, it doesn't matter. You still have to take some responsibility for time, whether you want to write slow and take years to get your book out, or if you want to write fast and crank a bunch of stuff out, depending how your brain is wired. Nonetheless, you still have to take responsibility for your time. So, and I've struggled with this because I have too many interests. I'm a professional. I used to be a firefighter. I worked in a bank. I was a minister for a great number of years. I've had businesses. I've done all these different things, and then I been a woodworker and all these other things. And so my problem is I have too many distractions, such as, I don't know, old typewriters of late. And so I have to discipline myself to get my work done before I can go off and do these other things. And it is, for me, a battle. Always has been, always will be. And I think that's true for most creative people, that they have lots of creative energy they want to spend, and we start feeling like we're going to miss out on something. And in the end, we end up robbing ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's not just, creative types are interested in all sorts of creativity, and not, we write, but we also sing, well, not well, but we also, draw or paint or whatever the case may be. There's lots of things. Play Magic the Gathering, play video games.
I don't know
watch
anybody
television.
who does that.
Only the smartest of us. Only the smartest of us. But we get wrapped up into these things, and I like what you say, Pops. It's an act of discipline, and we've got to discipline ourselves and make it a priority. Otherwise, it's real easy to fill the hours in the day, perhaps too easy. And so, but we do all have 24 hours. I like to say that I don't have time to work out. That's not necessarily true. I've chosen to not work out, and I'm reaping the benefits, as you can tell right now, of this awesome body here of not working out. I've chosen to spend my time doing other things, like, writing and sleeping, because I'm really bad at sleeping. So I've prioritized things. Writing needs to be a priority. You've got to do that. You've got, as Pops, as you say here, you've got to make writing the important thing. What do you mean by that?
Well, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but there's always a decision. Excuse me. There's a decision involved in this, and all the writers I know came to a point where they said, "All right, I'm going to write." So if they're going to write a novel, say, "I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a novel. That's what I'm going to focus on." Or if I'm going to be a short story writer, I'm going to start cranking out a short story a week, or every 2 weeks, or once a month, whatever it might be. And they then, by doing that, make writing the important thing, even if they have an outside job. They will find the time. And then one of the illustrations I like to use for this is my buddy Jerry Jenkins' The Left Behind series, that has sold probably more books than there are people on the planet. And he had a day job working for a magazine, would come home, spend time with his family after they all went to bed. That was his personal writing time. And he ended up writing 100 books. And before he really hit it big with the Left Behind series, with that, and that's what he did. So while his family slept, he wrote. I know writers who would get up at 4 in the morning so they could sneak in a little writing time before they went out the door. I know writers who would, that's how they spend their lunch hour. They pull out their brown bag, they sit down at work, and they think, all right, I'm going to spend the next 50 minutes, and I'm going to crank something out in the next 50 minutes. And that's what they do. They just get whatever they need to get done during that time. So it is an important first step to say, this is what I'm going to do. It's going to be important to me. It is, in fact, I think you say this a little bit later, writing is not optional. It's going to be mandatory. And I think you're right about that.
Yeah. That's the first decision you have to make. And it's a tough one. It's a scary one. It's easy to not write. And I think that there's always a part of us, especially as new writers, who are afraid of failure. Or afraid that we're going to write something poorly. And so it's just a lot easier to not even try. Pops, we go back to one of your axioms, Al's axioms, no one ever hit a home run from the dugout. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to write, and you're going to have to put your writing out there eventually. If you want to be a writer, you eventually have to show somebody what you've written. And you can't write if you're too busy doing other things. So you absolutely have to make the commitment to write. And once you do, it's tough. Don't think that it's easy. You're not going to just one day make the decision and then go right to it and finish your novel inside of a week. It's not going to happen.
Stop bursting my bubbles.
I apologize, Molly Jo, but I mean, we could take a quick poll. Pops, how long did it take you to write your first novel?
Oh, it took me quite a while, and then I set it aside for 5 years. It was probably the dumbest thing I've done. I've done a lot of dumb things, but that was really the dumbest thing. And I think that's why I wrote so many books after that, is I was trying to catch up for those lost 5 years. But I remember what I would do from that. I was a pastor at the time. I lived about 3 miles from the church, so at the end of my day, I would walk the 3 miles home, and I'd think about what I was going to write. And I would say hi to the family, and then I would sit down and I would commit an hour to the writing. And so every day after work, I committed to the writing of things. When I could, and sometimes on weekends. I do want to say this, because I want to make sure everybody hears us on this. We did not say that you need to make writing the most important thing in your life, because there are other things that are more important. Your family, your health, other things. You don't sacrifice your family on the altar of writing and publishing. All right, so it's not the most important thing. It is, however, for you as a writer, a very important thing if you want to be a writer.
I cannot agree more with you. I went to a class at Antioch where the guy essentially said you have to sacrifice your family for your writing, and I'm in the wrong class, because no, you don't. You really don't. You can write and still maintain a good, healthy family. It can be done. It is often done. And A, not only is it possible, B, I think it's mandatory, because if you are um, neglecting your family and going through a pretty messy divorce, your hours are going to fill up really fast with things like lawyer phone calls and court appearances and stuff like that. It's a whole lot of headache that you don't want. You can't sacrifice your family for your writing, and nor should your family ask you to sacrifice your writing for them. It's possible for them to coexist, and it's important for them to coexist. So you make a very good point, Pops. You do have to prioritize family. That's why Heather's not here right now. She's celebrating, I think, her daughter's birthday. So take care of that. That's important. You don't want your children to grow up resenting you because you're always working or ignoring them or whatever the case is. You want to be available to them. So like Jerry Jenkins waited until his children went to bed. Some get up early in the morning. Some do it on their lunch break. You can find these small pieces of time, piece them together to create something. I was going to kind of go back to this idea of how long it took us for our first novels to give our listeners an idea. I finished my first one in less than a year. And I say that not only to impress you, mainly to impress you, but we don't want to talk about the fact that I was actually unemployed and going to college, and that was my job, was to finish my novel. A. B, it was awful. It just wasn't any sort of good at all. My first published novel, the good one that I wrote, took much longer. I think it took about 1.5 to 2 years of really solid writing, a couple hours each day, 1,000 words a day, plus or minus, and being very diligent in that. And so through the process of creation and revision, it was about 2 years before I had a solid draft that I was able and willing to send out to publishers. So it's a commitment of time. You're not going to get a return on your investment right away, and that's where you can run into some things where perhaps your family's not supporting you, or they might encourage you, inadvertently they might encourage you to give up. They might say something like, well, you know, your writing's not bringing in any money, so why are you spending so much time doing it? You have to understand, and they have to understand, writing is a commitment that you've made because it's a part of who you are. It's something that you're going to do whether or not you get a paycheck. Eventually, the end goal is, yes, you want to support yourself with your writing, but also understand that's, if you're writing fiction, that's not happening anytime soon, unless you're, you know, Stephen King, and even he wrote for I don't know how many years before Carrie hit, and he got his first contract, and everything else was history after that.
Yeah, he quit on Carrie.
Yeah.
He stopped working on it. His wife made him finish it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He threw it away, and his wife pulled it out of the trash can.
That was Norman Vincent Peale, I believe.
No, that was also Stephen King with Carrie.
Oh, did he throw it away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his wife sent it to one last publisher, and that's when he got the contract. I believe that story's in On Writing by Stephen King. So
yeah, I think he said that you needed to finish this because you'll get paid more than the short stuff you're publishing in magazines. The Stephen King one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, and people will say that you have to sacrifice your family for it. And it's usually people who think that the occupation they're involved in is the world's most important occupation. Some are certainly difficult. If you're going to go to med school, you're going to be a doctor, and you're doing internships and stuff like that. That's a lot of long hours. So there may be sacrifice in that. But I do not agree with the idea that you have to sacrifice the invaluable for the valuable. And that's the way it is, I think, with family. To me, if you're sacrificing your family to write, you have a misguided idea of what writing is, and what it will do for you, and you're not doing the craft any good. So there are things more important than writing. In my life, not a whole lot of things. Family's there, but of all the other things I do, it's the writing, and it is why I'm having to retool what I'm doing this year. I've stepped away from a lot of things so I could go back to focusing on the writing. I'm making choices about what it is I'm going to do.
And those are choices you have to make. And Pops, you've been writing for decades, and you're still having to make these choices. And I kind of want our listeners to hear that and understand that. Like, the writing life is not something that you just commit to, and magically all of a sudden you're just a full-time writer and that's what you do and you make all your money. The reality for most writers is not only are you writing, but you're also doing other things. You're editing. You are perhaps doing some acquisitions for a publisher. You might be involved with a publisher in some way and doing some work for them. You're teaching at conferences. You've got a day job. There's a lot of things that will fill up your
Mm-hmm.
time as a writer that keep you from writing. And that's where it becomes really difficult, is where you're trying to balance that. You've got other paying jobs, and you want that paycheck, but you also have your own writing, which will eventually earn you a paycheck if you keep at it. But it's hard to understand that there's going to be a significant investment of time before you see any return on that investment, at least in financial return on that investment. If you are writing only for the financial return, you might want to think of some other jobs that you can get where you will work fewer hours and make more money. But most people who are writing because it's a part of them, and you understand that you're going to make that investment, and eventually you'll see a return on it, but it may not be the financial return that you're hoping for. It probably won't be, and that's okay. That's, again, not why we're in this. But you've got to make that time. So I've kind of compiled a list here. Let's go ahead, Molly.
Well, I was just going to say what you were saying about that. It's true. I don't know any of all the writers we know. I don't know any who are just a writer. We know you're a writer and a teacher. Al's a writer, conference director, all these other things. I'm a writer, editor, and I work during the day as an insurance agent. People in our writers group clubs and everything, they are the people at the conferences. They do so many other things to put food on the table. I don't know any writer who is just a writer, and even if they could afford to be just a writer, they still enjoy doing those other things. But what I was going to say is the flip side of that. You have to be careful of what you take on to pay the bills, because the next thing you know, you're taking on so many side projects trying to pay the bills that your writing is not getting done. And you're no longer a writer trying to put food on the table while you write, but now you're just an editor, just a social media person, or just a teacher, or just a director. So you have to kind of weigh out the options of, is that paycheck more valuable than the writing? Or at what point do you find that healthy balance?
I agree. I used to mentor writers, and really liked it originally, and then I took on quite a few students, and I started thinking, I would sit down and, I'm going to do some writing today, and I'd get an email from one of my students. Can you read these pages and tell me what you... Oh, man, there goes a writing for the day. And so that got to be kind of the norm, and so I've really scaled back on that, and I'm currently only mentoring one, and that's on a particular basis. We've got an arrangement worked out for that, and so...
like a social media
a
type
social
of
media
exchange?
ninja kind of a thing, yeah. So you handle my social media so I don't have to. That saves me time.
And you edit
That I can
NOLA
spend
for
writing.
me before
So
I
you
submit it to
do
other
work.
people.
Yeah, and so I understand that's an investment in my writing, actually, because you're saving me time by doing my social media. That's time that I would have come out of my writing block, if you will. And since you're saving me that time and allowing me to focus on my writing throughout the week, throughout the months, I don't mind when you send me something, and I enjoy going through it and talking with you about it. And we're able to since we live nearby, we're able to make our schedules work and meet fairly regularly and talk about writing and Magic the Gathering. The important things in life. So one day, Pops, I'm going to get you to play a game of Magic the Gathering. Yeah.
I'm sorry, that'd be one more thing to take me away from my writing.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, but it's worthwhile.
Well played, but not well played, but well played.
Welcome to Confusing Cast.
Confused.
Yeah. So I thought we might. I compiled just a real quick list of the easiest places, the easiest times to write. I say easiest. When I think of time, time management, it's blocking things out. And you could get a book on time management and read that if you want, and I'm sure it's going to have a lot more practical tips. But these are the times that I have worked where I've scheduled my writing, and I've kind of come up with some pros and cons to each of them. I originally started writing in the morning. It was something that I thought was beneficial to me because pretty much I can wake up. First of all, I wake up earlier than I ever want to and can't sleep. So I figured might as well make the most of it. So I would get up at 4 a.m. And I would drive into work, and I'd spend an hour and a half writing, plus or minus, before my day got started. And then I had all sorts of sleep problems, and I saw a sleep doctor, and he asked me what time I got up, and I said 4 o'clock, and he said, "On purpose?" You know? So anyhow, what I realized after I had done that for a number of months, years even, is that I would get into work and take a nap before I could write because I wasn't coherent enough to do any sort of writing. So if you're not a morning person, your brain is sluggish in the morning. I know my wife, whom I love dearly with all of my heart, is not a morning person. Please don't ever assume that she is. She's a slow roller. She's got to, build up that momentum and kind of wake up and yawn and stretch and drink her cup of tea, and then she's ready for the day. And that might be you. Me, I kind of roll out of bed, take my shower, and I'm ready to go. So the advantages to doing it in the morning is that you get it done before the rest of life gets in your way. You're not weary from an entire day's worth of work. If you work, you try and write in the evening. I know by that time I'm toast. I've already expended all my brain power. So the morning avoids that. The afternoon, at that point, your brain is up and going. Your other work, hopefully, is out of the way. You've been able to kind of put that on the back burner. You can focus on your writing at that time. The problem with writing in the afternoon or on your lunch break is that lots of things tend to come up. You got to pick up the kids. You got to make some phone calls. Laundry needs to be done. It's very easy to allow yourself to get distracted. And so I find the afternoon, during business hours when you have to run errands and do all sorts of other things, that can sometimes complicate issues. And then lastly is the evening. The advantage is you've already done all your work for your day job. It's not a distraction anymore. You can quietly, it's after business hours, so you're not worried about debt collectors calling. Well, I guess they call pretty much whenever they want to. But there are fewer interruptions, especially after the kids go to bed. And I know that's a good time for a lot of folk is writing after the kids go down. Talked about Jerry Jenkins doing that. But again, for me, that didn't work because writing on sleep deprivation, it was completely incoherent. Some of the stuff I put together. I wrote, I think, 22 pages one night, and I was really excited, and I woke up the next morning and read it, and none of it made sense. I had to scrap all of them. It's like, this is awful. I will never do this again. So that one doesn't work for me, but maybe it works for you. My wife is definitely a night person. I remember early on in our marriage, she came to me one night after I'd worked a full day. It was about 9 p.m., and I'd been working since 6 that morning. So I'd had a short 15-hour day or something, and I'm laying out on the couch watching TV, and she comes up to me and says, "I think I'm going to clean the garage." At 9 p.m. at night? Yeah. "I think I'm going to let you clean the garage. I will be here if you need me." So that tends to work for her. For me, not so much. Find what works for you is really the bottom line here. Pops, you've got some things listed here about being proactive.
Yeah, I learned a long time ago there are 3 types of actions. A person can be inactive, which means they do nothing. When presented with any kind of problem or situation or opportunity, we can be inactive, which is to do nothing. We can be reactive, which is an action taken on the spur of the moment. Usually happens without benefit of thought. Reaction is good when you're in danger. You're driving down the street, you have a blowout. You don't have enough time to say, now, what would be the proper course of action for me to take here? What are my options? Well, you don't have time to do that. You have to react. But those are rare, and they don't apply to what we're talking about. What does apply to what we're talking about is being proactive. And proactive is when you as a writer decide what needs to be done and you start doing it. And that's really the difference. So you have to be conscious of your choices. Decide what needs to be done. This is the project I'm going to work on. Here's what I'm willing to give up for it. And what's my next step? And you stay proactive by figuring those things out as you go. To make all of that work, there's a few things you have to stop. And I'm still learning some of these. They're hard to put into practice. They're easier to say than they are to put into practice. One is to stop the unproductive busy work. And writers tend to take on a lot of busy work. So I'm going to step on a couple of toes.
Ouch! Ouch!
Yeah, yeah, I have moved to Montana, so search for me there, Montana. One is it's stopping the unproductive busy work. I don't know how many writers spend hours on social media, spend hours writing blog posts that will appear for one day or maybe a week, then disappear. Now, I did blogging for a long time, and I turned it into one of my books, not a novel, but I just took all the advice I was giving on writing and turned it into a book. So I got some mileage out of that. But people are constantly doing things other than the work they set out to do. I'll get to my writing just as soon as I'm done with these 2 blog posts, make these 5 Twitter things happen, and they end up toasting the time that they have. And I get requests all the time. Come join our writing team. We have a bunch of writers working on this blog post. I've probably had 4, 5, 6 of those. If I accepted all of them, I've accepted one, and then when I was doing Blue Ridge, I had that one. I accepted one, and again, to step on toes, I kind of resent it. I hate that one day a month that I have to come up with that blog post because I'm writing for someone else. I'm not writing for me. I'm writing someone else's project. I'm not writing my project. So whatever the unproductive busy work, and by unproductive I mean it's not getting you towards your goal, stop it. Stop the interruptions. People will interrupt you because after all, you're a writer, you're not really working. You'll get things like, hey, I'm moving. Can you come over and help me move? Because I know, you're not doing anything. Well, I'm doing a ton when I'm writing. So you have to limit the interruptions, and sometimes that means turning off the stinking email. And when I get on a tight deadline, I look at my email 3 times a day, in the morning, after lunch, and before I turn the computer off. I try to limit that, and I turn everything else off. Stop the time sharks. These are people who eat up your time. I can't tell you how many times I hear, will you read this for me? Can you edit this for me? Can you write a forward? Can you do this? And it just goes on and on and on. And they mean well, but what they're doing is they're chewing up a lot of my time, and I know I'm being blunt about all of this. It's my fault for saying yes. I was a pastor for so long, I forgot how to say no. And so now I turn most of those things down. I just got another request like that the other day, and I tell them, no, really, I can write my stuff, or I can write your stuff, and I'd rather write mine. Yeah, there was a guy who did a great work on creativity, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because it's a long Slavic name, 5 or 6 consonants in a row and stuff. But he was polling people who were creatives, and he sent out questionnaires to writers, and several of the writers wrote back, I do what I do because I don't respond to questionnaires. I get stuff done because I don't take time to answer your questions, and that's the only answer they would give them. They became very protective of that. Stop trying to make every area of your life perfect. You will be making sacrifices. Just decide what it's worth.
I don't understand. I'm a perfectionist. I don't understand what you just said.
Well, one of the comments I read is, you really don't have to have the cleanest house on the block if you want to be a writer.
Shut your mouth.
It needs to be clean enough, but it doesn't have to be the cleanest.
Look at Aaron over there. I see you celebrating, Aaron.
Messy house. I've got a reason now. I'm not vacuuming. I got to write. Don't you understand?
This is true for other endeavors, too. It's not just writing, but if you're going to attempt something great, such as writing a book or a series of short stories or whatever, you're not going to be able to do everything. So just own up to it and know that that's going to happen. I haven't done any woodworking in ages, partly because we ended up moving to Fresno and partly because I've been doing other writing things. So I had to choose. And that's a choice I made for now. And stop beating yourself up. Every day is brand new. So if you have a day where you try to get all your writing done, your goal, whatever it was for that day, and you didn't make it, so what? It's a new day. Go after it again. Just means you're human. Yeah. It's not about being fast. It's about being productive.
And there are some other practical tips here that we can give our listeners as well. How do you make that time? And so practically speaking, I think the easiest thing to do is give up another hobby, or at least scale back on another hobby. You cannot tell me that you are working 18 hours a day and sleeping 6. That just is not the reality for most of America. You have downtime. You have hours in the day where you're not doing things. I know this because I see you on Candy Crush. Not that I ever play, but it
Who are you
happens.
talking to, Aaron?
You specifically. And what we learn here is that you've got the time. Scale back on that. Use it as a carrot on the string. This is what I do with Magic the Gathering, and I love me some Magic the Gathering. I actually judge. I'm a judge for tournaments and things of that nature. Um, I love it. I could easily spend hours and hours a day on it, but that's not what I really want to do. I want to finish writing my books, and that's really what's more important to me. So I have scaled way back on that. I used to do a lot more with the judging. I've scaled that back quite a bit, and I use it as a carrot on the string. If there's some other hobby that you really enjoy, even if it's as simple as watching television, maybe you're following like 14 different television series or something like that. You know what? Just don't watch this week's. Don't watch today's until you've finished your writing. Carrot on the string. I know when I reach my writing goal for the day, then I can play with my magic decks and I can rearrange my cards and I can do this or that, but not until my writing is done. So you either give it up or you scale it back, and I also think that you should use it as kind of a carrot on the string. I think you can also make more time in your work day. And I highly advocate this. I am a teacher, and I am generally the first one on campus because I go in early so I can do my writing. I get all my teaching stuff done first, so I'm ready for the day, and once I'm ready for the day, I turn my attention to writing. And that's when I get a lot of work done because I'm in a quiet environment. I don't have to worry about my children running in and out or doing whatever the case may be, or having to fix, a broken sprinkler head or anything like that. I'm at work. I can focus and do that. So I think if you can make time during your workday, whether that's going in early or staying late or on your lunch break, taking, I think as you said somewhere in the show notes, Pops, keeping a notebook handy, or on your smartphone, there are apps where you can write novels on smartphones. I could not because autocorrect would just destroy me, but some of you are good at that. So make the time somehow in your work day. The other reason I do that, the reason I go in early, is so that I can be done by the time my children are done with school. And already I'm planning for next year when my oldest son Josiah, is going to be on campus with me. So that'll be a big adjustment for us, but he'll be done when I'm done.
Think of the opportunities to embarrass him.
Oh, I've been planning that for years, Pops. I've been keeping
file
notes.
cabinets.
I've been keeping notes. But he's such a good kid. It would be really tough to embarrass him. Anyhow, I've already made plans for how I'm going to do that. I don't want to write early in the morning because I don't want him getting up any earlier than he has to because he's like his mom, and grumpy in the morning. So I will probably end up writing, and I'll just say, come in, and your other brothers are off at 3:30. You're off at 2:20. So you're doing your homework for an hour, and I'm writing for an hour, and that's when things become happy. The other way you say, Aaron, I don't want to cut back on stuff. I'm not giving up another hobby, or I really enjoy my television. I'm not going to give that up. Okay, do this. Shave off 5 minutes from your time, the time you take to get ready. Shave off 5 minutes from your bill paying time. Shave off 5 minutes from your television watching. Shave off 5 minutes less of Candy Crush a day, and now you've got 20 minutes to write. And so you don't have to cut things out completely, but maybe just budget about 5 minutes less or even 10 minutes less of whatever it is that's taking up your time. And the last one that I'm going to mention, with a warning, of course, the easiest way to find time to write is to quit your day job. Now, that being said, you also have bills to pay. So if you are planning on quitting your day job, and I think you should at some point, I'm working toward that goal myself. I think the writing dream is to be able to support yourself as a writer. Number one, make sure you have a savings. You don't want to put your family at risk. You don't want to put yourself at financial risk. Make sure you have a savings because you're not getting paid up front. Make sure that you're financially savvy so that you can protect yourself as you do this, as you take this step. Have a plan in mind. And then if you do quit your day job, make sure you are writing. Become your own boss and make sure that you're meeting all your goals and have more ambitious goals. If I quit my day job, my goal would not be 1,000 words per day. It would be like 10,000 words a day. Probably wouldn't make that, but if I'm not doing anything else, if I don't have my full-time job, there's really no reason for me not to, quadruple my productivity as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, of course, is going to give you the biggest bang for your buck, but it can also cause the biggest bang to your buck. If I'm trying to
let me get you out of that.
Clever. Thank you.
A lot of people think because they're working at home that they don't have to apply their business principles to their writing, and that's just wrong. I have a friend who's an attorney. He works out of his home, and he puts on a tie every morning, and he walks from his bedroom into his office, and he wears a tie. And the reason is, he says, I dress professional because I am a professional, and I want to feel like a professional when I'm at work. Tie comes off when he leaves the office. Now, you don't have to do that as a writer. You can, go in your underwear and your slippers if you want, but you still have to put the time in. You still have to do the work. So if you're writing full time, you need to be doing something with that, unless you're a huge bestseller and they're giving you 7 figures, so you put 3 months in and then you live the rest of the time off the money. But otherwise, if you're going to be what we call a working writer, that might be a new phrase to some. A working writer is someone who, if they don't write, they don't eat. And so they have to do that to pay the mortgage and things like that. They produce, and so I have a room that is my office, and I always think of it as my office.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are quickly running out of time. Pops, you've still got a lot of points to make, so I'm not sure. Is there a particular point here that you feel is more? I'll put all these on the show notes, but is there a particular point here that you feel is more important for our listeners to hear?
Yeah, let me just give a game highlight here through this. Another important thing to do is balance feeling and thinking. Sometimes we feel too much and think too little. Let the logical side make some of your decisions, not what you feel. There'll be days when you don't feel like writing, and the only thing you can do about that is, want to guess? Write anyway.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how you feel. What matters is what you've determined to do. And a poor writing session is still better than no writing session. If nothing else, you found what's not working. Like Thomas Edison said with the light bulb, I didn't fail 7,000 times. I found 7,000 things that don't work, and have logged them. So even a bad day of writing is better than no writing in the day. Use your downtime, which you talked about. That is a notebook. First real writer, I'm going to put real in air quotes. The first real writer I met she was doing a book signing in the mall, and all the kids are itty-bitty, and I'm pushing them along. She started talking to us. She asked the names of the children, and I have a daughter named Shondell, which is kind of an unusual name. And out came this notebook. This lady pulled out a notebook, wrote that down, asked how you spelled it. She says, I think I'm going to use that in my next book. She's writing all the time, and she heard something she could use, so she grabbed it. So remember, some of your most important writing that you're going to do is not at the keyboard. It's when you're in bed thinking about it, what you're going to write. It's when you're driving. It's when you're in the shower. These things are percolating. The subconscious always works on it. So it isn't necessarily how many minutes you spend at the keyboard pounding away on the keys. You're doing a lot more work just thinking about stuff. I've done a fair amount of writing watching a movie in the theater because something will be triggered, and then I start memorizing what it is. So a great deal of writing happens away from the keyboard. Be sure to take some time off. We don't want you to think that we're saying you have to work constantly. You need to take some time off because imagining stuff is hard work. Being creative is hard work. So understand the power of the walk away. Every once in a while you just have to get up and walk away. And you are really doing more than you know. That is still part of the writing. You're refreshing that creative muscle. There are times when I've had to work 7 days a week. I wrote one novel in 6 weeks.
Wow.
I don't want to do it again.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it turned out quite well actually, and got lots of good comments and stuff. And I don't want to write a book in 6 weeks again.
Which
Uh,
book was that? I'm sorry, I'm really curious. Which book was that?
I think it was the first Jeff Struecker book that I wrote. And part of the problem was he was still in the army at the time, and he was in Afghanistan or something, so communication wasn't all that good. I think that's where he was. But anyway, so when all the contracts were signed and the basic principle of the story was laid down, I had 6 weeks to meet the contract. So, I was working 7 days a week and putting some of the long hours in and trying to get the thing done. You don't want to do that too often. You want to take some time off. I try to take half a Friday off. I take all of Sunday off. I'm a couch potato on Sunday. NASCAR started up, so that's probably where you'd find me on a Sunday with my fanny in the chair pretending to watch NASCAR. But part of it is plan to get away from the keyboard. But the other times I have to make myself sit down and do it. So, last couple things is simply this. Time is an investment. You only get so much of it. You don't know how much. You could live to 100. This might be your last night on this earth. So we really, really don't know. And the older I get, the more I keep thinking, whoa, that clock is ticking fast. I got to get some of this stuff done before I kick the bucket. So time is a use it or lose it commodity. It is not coming back. You can't bank the stuff. So
That's so
when you think
unfair.
it is unfair, when you're thinking, should I watch a couple more hours of television? Start watching early or skip a couple days of writing. Understand you're not going to get those hours back. We've already talked about learn to say no. People will use all the time you'll give them. So sometimes you have to be hard-nosed and say, nope, I'm done doing that. Take it from a guy who learned that the very, very hard way. So a few things: eliminate time wasters. Television and videos can be time thieves, so use that correctly. Email will eat up a lot of time. A phone, listen, just because it rings doesn't mean you have to answer it. You're not Pavlov's dog. Somebody didn't get a phone in their house, and they said they couldn't see the reason for a phone to give permission to anybody who had a phone to ring a bell in their house any hour of the day without permission. And that's what a phone was. So he just stayed away from the phones. Teach others to respect your time. You might be surprised what a closed door can do. Or if you're going out to, say, the pinnacle of all writers, that mecca for all writers, Starbucks, put on a pair of headphones so somebody won't feel like they want to talk to you about who's running for president or something. You put those headphones on and almost no one will bother you. And again, we've already talked about things being more important than writing. So schedule time to write is the last bit. This is when you say, this is when I'm going to write, and you protect it unless some emergency comes up, but you protect it as much as you possibly can.
Ruthlessly.
Ruthlessly.
Yeah. And you'll have to teach your family that when it takes time. It's one of the hardest things is writing when you have kids, and I remember writing and Levi coming up, Daddy, can we play now? And I'm like, you got to let me finish what I'm doing. And okay, 2 minutes later, Daddy, can we play now? Daddy, can we play now? And I finally just told him, I love that kid. Like, I would love to put that computer down and play. And I told him, I said, I really want to play with you, Levi, but I can't until my work is done. And when you keep asking me if we can play, it really slows me down. It's going to take me a lot longer to finish. So if you want me to be able to play with you and have more time with you, you've got to let me concentrate and finish up now. And so that was kind of a kind way of doing it rather than what my Antioch professor advocated, which is screaming obscenities at them and throwing things at them until they left the room. I do not advocate that.
Moron.
Yeah, exactly. So, I learned a lot of great things at Antioch. I also learned some really terrible things at Antioch, so that was one of them. And I just want to reiterate, learn to say no. It's really hard, and I don't know why writers especially have a tough time. I think we want people to like us, and they want us to do things free. And we don't want to feel like jerks saying no, we don't. We want to be kind and courteous and remember all the people who have helped us along our writing journey. Um, but how insulted would you be? I don't go into Starbucks and say, "Can you make me a coffee for free?" I really want to be a barista someday, and I just want to see you make a coffee. I mean, I don't. You wouldn't expect them to do that, but somehow, oh, you're a
Well,
writer.
I,
I want
I, I
you to do my
would, but
stuff
that's
free.
different.
You have actually, Molly. So,
Yeah.
but we won't talk about that. So, anyhow, um, some
Shut
really.
up.
Molly, do we have any questions, comments, or concerns from the chat room?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that Tess it's a good and bad thing. She's going to be staying with us in the chat room because she did not make it into the orchestra, and I'm
Oh,
sorry she didn't make it in the orchestra because she plays the cello beautifully. But
Cello is
I'm
a wonderful instrument.
Yes, but I'm very excited that she's going to be available on Tuesday nights for us. So hooray for that.
that's
She
a win
says,
for us. Yeah.
that's what I say. She says no is a freeing word. She does not use it often enough. She likes to write in the morning. Her writing schedule usually is she's home at 2 o'clock. She'll put on the teapot, write for 2 hours, cello for 30 minutes, dinner, housework, and if she's not too tired, she'll write some more. And
I think
going
Tess needs to
back,
write an opening music piece on the cello for us.
ooh, yes.
Oh, wait, are
Okay,
you asking
Tess,
her to
you've
do
been
something for
snapped.
free?
No, I wouldn't ask her to do anything for free. I'm just saying it would be nice to have a nice cello intro and
Let,
outro.
let me pull out the
And
editor card here. Tess, if you want your stories edited some more,
oh
make
no,
us an opening piece.
we'll
It's a,
barter. We'll barter
it's
for
a
it.
barter. And Marie Bass is in the room tonight, so I always like it when she's in. She's one of those quiet listeners, but she comments every so often. She says she doesn't have trouble finding the time to write, but her agent says she needs a big social media following, and that takes a lot of time to build up that. So she finds what you were saying, Aaron, that it does cut into the writing time. Do we have any suggestions? And of course, that was at the beginning when we were talking about that. We have some different
Yeah,
options for that.
significantly. I I just advocate just hiring somebody, finding a way. I barter with Molly. We've talked about that before. So
Yeah.
she does stuff for me. I do stuff for her, in all writing related. And if you can work something out like that, great. Otherwise, I don't want to get too much into it. Molly's going to be a better one to answer that particular question. She's a lot more gifted with that. But I know there are some
Okay.
programs that you can get and schedule things to post throughout the week so that you don't have to be
Mhm.
on it 24/7.
Edie Meltson teaches you can do all your social media in 30 minutes.
Yes.
She sets
Yeah.
aside 30 minutes in the morning. She does all her social media for the day, and she's done with that.
Well,
And I
okay.
took her class at Blue Ridge last year where she talked about that, and that's I already knew a lot, but that was one of the aspects that stood out with me, and it's pretty accurate. If you don't let yourself get distracted by the emails, the games, the this, the that, the rabbit holes, 30 minutes a day, and you can set up all your posts, all your marketing, all your responses, and then the next day you just reply to whoever's commented within the last 24 hours. It's an easy system once you get into the pattern of doing that.
If I could do it in 30 minutes a week, I'd be happy. That sounds more reasonable to me. So here's where we come to the time where we are wrapping up. And next week we've got an open session. We've got a wild card with no topic. So I'm doing this live on the air, which is going to be totally embarrassing, but we can come up with something, the three of us. Room for those of you listening, if you've got an idea of something that you'd like to see us talk about, feel free to send us suggestions. Those of you listening on audio, I'm going to try and get this cast up quickly, hopefully as early as tomorrow, so that you guys can also suggest via aarongansky.com or through our Facebook or Twitter suggestions for what to cover next week. If we don't come up with something, perhaps we just let Molly kind of do a social media special on how to do some of this stuff. So we'll talk about that. We'll keep you posted. We'll keep you posted, but we'll kind of let it percolate, as you say, Pops, for next week. So don't forget, you can also ask the author at aarongansky.com, and you can find us at altongansky.com, at Frankly My Dear Mojo, and at aarongansky.com, and also heatherluby.com, and she'll be on in a couple of weeks, so you can always find her there.
Yay.
So we do thank you all for listening, and until next week, good writing.